All right, great. Well, excited to be sitting down with Yvonne Martinez today. Yvonne is one of the directors at the Transformation Center here at Bethel Church. I think you are the director of the Transformation Center, actually.
Oh my gosh, we flip hats over here all the time. Right now, I'm ministries coordinator, so I'm just happy to have any spot at all.
Well, you definitely are leading the charge at that Transformation Center. We've also worked pretty closely in the context of trauma therapists. She has been a huge resource for some of the trafficking survivors that we work with here locally
Mhm.
in Shasta County. I'm excited to talk to Yvonne within the context of what we're doing this month, which is the theme of hard at rest, which, there's a little bit of a dichotomy even in the phrasing, a little bit of a like, what? Hard at rest? Yeah. And really what we're trying to approach is as people who are poured out, leaders who have said yes to a particular mission, like we're going after bringing solution or shift in some area of social need,
Mhm.
there's that need to stay full while you pour out. And
Mhm.
I feel like talking to a therapist, counselor, somebody that sits in the space you do vocationally, you're just going to have a unique perspective. Like I would imagine you interact with folks that may be on that line of being burnt out or certainly passing through really hard circumstances. How do you still live as poured out when you're carrying the weight of trauma or you've been through hard stuff? So why don't we just quickly start with some of your background, what you're doing. I know I've already mentioned it. You're in a therapy space, counselor space, but share with people what you do vocationally.
All right, so I have been in the counseling world since way back when Lance and I went to the same church. We didn't know each other because he's one of my son's ages.
Yeah,
But anyway, so back in the day, since the early '80s, which will really date me,
yeah.
uh, but that's okay. Been doing counseling, and really, it really started with my own testimony. And of course, when you receive, gifts from the Lord and you actually walk through your healing, there's nothing more fantastic than being able to look at life at a new perspective. So right away, of course, the mission is to, comfort others with your comfort. And so, the first time I shared my testimony, there were 120 women at the meeting and 80 came forward for prayer. And not only was I overwhelmed, but I had this sense that this was going to be my life's call, that I had an experience with the Lord that I wanted to share. So in the early days, it really just started out with walking alongside other people for short periods of time, and then bringing it fast forward, I actually did some different education. I got my addiction credentials. I have a school of education, written 23 books now. So it's been a fun journey, but um, I get to do what I love to do every day. And so certainly in the beginning, my story was, 90% pain and 10% healing, where now after all of these years, I hardly even really think about my own story because I've walked it out, and it's really been tried in a lot of ways. When I say tried, in the context of meeting people that would experience and share things similar to my own experience early on. But I think honestly, I learned to stay in my own lane. Like I always knew when I was outside my scope and I was going to have to fake it. I was going to have to be somebody I'm not. And I
Wow.
just couldn't do that. I had to learn early on that I had to admit if something was over my head. I had to know my boundary of when it stopped helping other people, it would start protecting me. And I would have that
Wow.
sense that I knew that when that began to change, that I had to retreat back to staying in my own lane.
Yeah. So that sounds like a big key with what we're talking about staying full as you're living poured out is stay in your lane, recognize where you're actually benefiting others. And when you're not, okay, are you starting to try to do something to keep something alive that maybe the Lord didn't want to come alive, right?
That's true. Mhm.
Do you want to share any bulk of like more concise version, like when you talk about your testimony, just so not for the sake of sharing the depths of your testimony, but maybe some people are going to want to follow you after this. So
Mhm.
what are you speaking about when you say, hey, I shared my testimony, a lot of people resonated? What are we talking about there generally for you, your story?
Well, by the time I was 24 years old, 25 years old, I had been sexually assaulted, I had been molested, I had been
Okay.
raped at gunpoint, I had multiple marriages by that time, and when I was 25, I was diagnosed with cancer and 5 years to live. So my journey up until that point was a fight,
Yeah.
every day until, and I grew up in a middle class home. I owned businesses, so I wasn't somebody who didn't have resources, but I had no connection in terms of humanity and support, that kind of thing. So when I met Tony, he led me to receive Jesus, and I was like 26 and a half, something like that. And we were married about a year later, and I say, he married this 105-pound cute little girl, and he came home one day and he was married to a gorilla because I flipped. I didn't know how to have real relationships, so
Yeah.
that all flipped. And so this, we've been married, well, we've been together now 44 years. I'm 45 years cancer free. And so I think I had every year that I walked it out, I learned more and I grew more. But in those early days, you think about 40 years ago, how did women say they had been sexually assaulted? How did the shame that women carried for things they had done and what had happened to them? We've come so far in that arena that it's not, we don't carry the shame that we used to carry in the church. So I think I was a spearhead in a lot of ways for being able to use the words that people in church didn't know how to say.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's how I got here.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of, we want to live full lives. We want to live poured out. We don't want to sit on the sidelines, twiddling our thumbs. So embracing the idea of rest that we're actually not making a mark or doing what the Lord's invited us into. But for some of us, we're saying yes to the Lord and we're so invested in making impact or living out what we feel like God's invited us into that we find ourselves on that edge of burnout or overworked or hey, we're not full anymore.
Mhm.
What have you noticed, whether you're just talking about as a therapist, I see this in people's lives, or just as a leader, the things that you've gleaned along the path of what it means
Well,
to stay full
yeah.
while you're pouring out? Yeah.
Well, a couple of things come to mind. One is that we follow the shepherd. When we start to feel chased or we start to feel that we're being pushed, then we're no longer being led, and then we find ourselves moving in our own strength. The other thing is that we also have to be really aware of what is it we're really called to do. We want to make an impact. And sometimes we think, oh, I'm going to jump into trafficking. I'm going to work with people that are addicted. I'm going to find people on the street and bring them to my house and they're going to get help. And we actually do things for the wrong motive. We do it because we think it's a powerful ministry, but actually anything that we do on behalf of following what the Lord's called us to do, we can be effective at doing it. So I think that when we run ahead of what the Lord has called for us is that we don't stay in our lane. We get motivated by the need. And Jesus was never motivated by the need. He was motivated by listening to his Father. So many times he went away and he had rest, or he got out in a boat, he slept when there was a storm. So I think we have to understand what is motivating us. We can have a passion for a theme or a ministry like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or John Walsh, who has, his foundation because of his son. So many ministries were started and foundations were started out of the plight to save the demographic that affected them. And then they find that they're actually being ran by the ministry or the foundation rather than them actually being the lead and leading others in that direction. So I think it goes back to really finding, what are our strengths? How can we make an impact with our strengths? And then how can we collaborate with others, that we're not a lone ranger out there trying to do something on our own.
That's beautiful. I love that thought, like being led versus being driven by our vision or our ministry. That's really profound. What have you seen, if anything, in that pretty unique chair you sit in of a therapist counselor? Like you've, and obviously we're not talking about, disclosing people's stories here, because what happens in your counseling settings are private. But what have you been able to observe from people that come to you for help and input with respect to this dynamic of maybe burnout, overworked, somehow things get out of balance in their lives as they're pursuing a mission? Any keys you picked up along the way, or insights you've gained, even just as a therapist counselor, looking at other people's lives?
I think that you in your own skin
Yeah,
cannot accept the invitation to their chaos party.
yeah,
Meaning that when people come in, they're desperate for help. Sometimes they'll sit, in my office, they'll clam up, they'll feel embarrassed, they'll feel traumatized by the fact that they finally can put words to what happened to them. And so I don't have to do anything, I just have to be. In fact, I try to set the pace when they come in, that I'm at peace, I'm there. I ask them, what do they need? What do they need help with? I don't try to assume anything. I don't do a lot of questions in the beginning until they feel safe. Because if they don't feel safe, their adrenaline will not even let them think clearly to tell me what it is that they need. So I might just walk them through an exercise to help for them to calm down, so that we can just talk about what's going on.
yeah,
So it's nothing official. It's nothing big deal. It's just, hey, you're here and I'm here. Let's just talk for a few minutes.
yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. When people feel safe, there's like an exchange of life and
Mm,
vulnerability happens. And
absolutely.
uh,
Yeah.
when you're in the role you're in, and I think there are some parallels here, when people are working in spaces where there's injustice or brokenness or trauma, how do how do you, for one, and maybe some of this will translate to other people who are running nonprofits or active in spaces where they're working with really traumatized people, how do you not pick up secondary trauma? uh, so maybe think broader than just as a therapist. Maybe some of this answer could translate to leaders that are working with those that have been traumatized, or the environments they're in are extremely traumatic environments. How do they not pick up that secondary trauma? How are they staying in a place of rest, even though what's going on around them is so chaotic?
I think it has a lot to do with, is it me or is it what's around me? Like how can I help a situation that's traumatic if I partner in the trauma?
Yeah,
So I think that it has to do with, the sensing our own bodies, and the unique place of, if I'm on the mission field and there's being bombs dropped everywhere, I should not necessarily feel safe, because that sense of knowing I'm going to have to do something here really quick, I'm going to have people to save, I'm going to have to move, I'm going to have to get going, as opposed to, does the environment call for me to be proactive? Am I going to be an activator, or am I going to be an observer? And so in my sessions, because we're here in my world, I'm an observer. I pull back to observe what's happening, to assess what's really going on, or how I can make an impact, as opposed to being on the mission field where I'm gathering people, for safety. It requires a sense of pushed adrenaline. But when people come in, they are used to intensity. Their lives are filled with intensity. And if they give me the invitation and I'm pulled into their intensity, to their pain, then I've lost my perspective. It doesn't mean that I don't have compassion, or I don't lean into what they're saying, but it means that I have to be an observer of it and not a participator, and walk out of my personal boundary. Because when we don't have good personal boundaries, we won't have good spiritual boundaries. And we can get pretty confused in the spiritual realm when we partnered with somebody, and what I call, when we hear their story, I'm very cautious about how long I walk in their shoes, meaning that I'm not them. I can hear what they're saying, but there's a certain place where I learned I walked too long in their shoes, meaning I started to feel and carry what they were sharing. And then I have to pull back, take those shoes off, come back to where I'm at so that my perspective can be in balance.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. What would you speak to this idea? I think some people sometimes are not invested and they are on the sidelines in some respect
Mm.
because getting out there is so scary. And maybe they have been out there in a past season and it didn't work out and trauma ensued and maybe burnout took place. And now they're like, if they were honest with themselves, they're kind of, their rest has become more than rest. It's like resting is their job slash their mission has been, they're devoid of their mission. So like getting back in the game, I wonder if there's any thoughts in your mind on that.
Well, there's various stages
Yeah.
of, leading to burnout. So we have compassion fatigue, where we have given and given and given and loved people and given so much that we're spiritually and emotionally and physically exhausted. And then there's secondary or vicarious trauma, where we actually walked too close, meaning that we started being a little codependent in that relationship. And sometimes it happens because we have certain affinities towards people or situations that we wouldn't give that same amount of time or attention to other people. Um, and so those independents can become, codependent rather than interdependent. So I think the difference between what you're talking about a little bit is the difference between stress and burnout. So stress is where I still have ideas. I'm still contemplating how I'm going to do this, how it's going to work out. I'll think of tons of ideas on how I might be able to strategize with that. When that has gone on too long and you've exhausted yourself, and the adrenaline that you have and your oomph, to keep going, can easily move into burnout. And burnout is when I have no more ideas. I actually don't even care. I don't care if I go to work. I don't care about the job. I don't care about anything. So I think that those two situations are addressed differently, that in that area of stress, it's developing a balance so that you recognize when you're too invested.
Yeah.
Certainly, there are ministries that this is their 24/7 job, that they are out there 24/7 and there is no rest. This is their vocation, is this level of intensity. And so for those people, I really bless them. I can't do that. I couldn't be on the war zone, day after day after day. Because even at that level, even if you're called to do it, um, there has to be some break. Either you will create a break or it can break you. And that self-awareness is just really important, of knowing when I've reached my limit. There can be, honestly, in ministry, a lot of shame about, oh, you're tired, you're giving up. I heard this saying a long time ago, ministers never retire. How do you ever retire from giving the gospel to people? So this idea that we have to totally exhaust ourselves to give everything away. Well, my goodness, I want another 25 years doing what I do. So I have to save a little bit. I have to hold a little bit back.
So yeah, we're starting to get into self-care. Like what does self-care look like for those of us that are poured out? Like I don't know, a work-life balance, work hard, play hard. What kind of tools have you picked up along the way
Mhm.
that keep you going and keep you fresh? And we're talking about spirit, soul, body here, right?
Yeah, I think it was Easter Sunday, 2020, when COVID had hit, and it was the first Easter Sunday at home, and I happened, even though I did our church on, TV, I watched the old films of Billy Graham, and I found myself crying and crying and crying and revisiting revival. And while it was COVID, it was Sunday, I never went to church in my pajamas before. you know, um, I had just had this moment of revival with the Lord. And I think we have to have those times of our personal revival, that we're letting go, that we actually, for me, it's the tears, it's the music, it's the song, it's the revisiting my own personal experience with the Lord that keeps me going. I mean, I love to come to work every day. I love what I get to do because I feel that I have that space with him that nobody else has that. Nobody else has that space.
Yeah. Yeah. And conversely, what do you speak to somebody that is in that stress or burnout space where the caring is diminishing, the creativity is diminishing, the sense of like passion is waning? Is I hear what you're saying very clearly, like, yeah, reconnect with the Lord, make sure you're taking time with him. Are there other things that feel practical, or maybe they're less spiritual, that can strengthen the sense of vigor and
Mhm. I think having collaboration with your leadership is really important,
okay.
that you actually let people that are speaking into your life know that you're having, and that's why I say sometimes it can feel in ministry a little shamed, or, what happened, you used to go stronger and longer than you do now. And so I think having that compassion, same compassion for ourselves, that we are honest with people that speak into our lives. I mean, I've gone into my boss's office more than one occasion and I said, I'm having a series of things that don't seem to be going right. Tell me what you see about me that I don't see.
Wow.
And I open that vulnerability to, because we can't always see
Right.
our own flaws. And so having people that are honest enough with you to be able to tell you the truth about what they see and to really validate, your need to have some time off or rest, or, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. In that right there, just speaking about workplace dynamics. So I heard a great key. Like, you have the kind of relationship with your bosses or your leaders
Mhm.
that you can have a vulnerable exchange and get the kind of input that you need to thrive. Are there other dynamics? Because sometimes some of our burnout tendencies or stressed out tendencies can be tied to the actual work environment.
Absolutely.
So you're giving a huge key of like, stay connected to those around you. Don't be alone.
Mhm.
Don't be isolated. Anything else that you've recognized over the years working in multiple environments about
Mhm.
how work environments can help us stay full?
Well, I think sometimes they can lead us to be too full.
Okay.
That we've given out so much
Yeah.
because it's expected. It's expected. This is your remuneration. This is your call, and if you're expected to lay down your life. But I think at some point, Jesus did lay down his life, and we can actually partner with a bit of a religious spirit,
Mm,
thinking we have to do things, longer and harder, and take the hard task all the time, the difficult road all the time.
right.
So if you're in a workplace environment where you don't have leadership that actually has empathy for you as their employee, or doesn't have built into their, then I'm just going to say it from the top down, a trauma informed environment
Yeah.
means that from the very top, the administrators, the stakeholders understand the impact of trauma, and they understand all the way down from the president of the corporation to the receptionist at the front desk what trauma is and what it looks like. So right there is not a trauma informed environment. So therefore, how can they minister trauma informed care when they don't exemplify it within their organization? So the trying to be the only one in your organization that is trauma informed and understands the impact of trauma, and that self-care can be, a bit of a rub and a fight to bring the balance of the organization, because they're motivated by donations, they're motivated by, situations, by people in the, out there with their lives on the line. So I think it's an organizational problem that you as an employee may not be able to solve that. Um,
And what does that mean in a nutshell? Being trauma informed and the trickle down of that. Like, talk
mhm,
about what you mean there. What is trauma informed, and how that would spread through an organization in a
mhm,
positive sense? What's
mhm.
that mean?
Well, I happen to have a trauma-informed training for professionals and organizations.
Sign us up.
Yeah, I have a bunch of those. So I think it is at the very basic understanding that trauma is an event that somebody had an experience and there's lasting effects. Many of our Christian organizations are built around helping people that have been traumatized and reinvest, and we're investing their reinvestment, back in life. But if we don't have that same care for the employees and the people that are working, that we understand that they're experiencing that vicarious trauma, really not because they're weak or they're not doing a good job, but to people that tend to have an affinity towards that burnout, or people that have very high quality strengths. They have a strength of loyalty, they have a strength of perseverance, they have strategy, they carry strengths of connectedness and responsibility. And those very strengths that they have call them and pull them into situations where their strengths can be magnified and used, but they can also be manipulated and used for the wrong way as well. So people that are in those situations, it's not because they're bad or they did anything wrong. It's their sense of loyalty and their commitment to the mission that pulls them to do what's right because they believe in what they're doing. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, but any good thing that goes too far becomes a weakness.
Sure. And the way being trauma informed trickles down is I'm assuming it's just a general culture of compassion, of understanding, of like we get that we're walking with people in process.
Mhm.
Is that what's being inferred?
Well, there are 10 key components to a trauma-informed organization. So, one is trustworthiness. Two of them are trustworthiness and collaboration. The trustworthiness in employer to employee, employee to employer, as well as collaboration, where there are collaborative discussions around situations, the debriefing, and the undergirding support of team members that are not just sitting back signing papers, but are at the front desk. I was at a particular organization. I was getting ready to leave. I had done some work there that day. And right when I was getting my suitcase to go out the door, a truck pulled up. Somebody jumped out of the truck and a male jumped out of the truck and started beating them. Everybody at that front desk, 3 women that were there, 4 women, ran outside and circled around that woman and brought her through the doors. They encompassed her, and I just burst out crying. I thought I had never seen a group of people that risked their lives to save somebody else. And then they got her care, they got her something to drink, and they called 911. And at the course of that, they all sat there with each other and they held hands. And I thought, it made me cry. It was such a beautiful experience that
Wow.
nobody thought, oh, should we really do this? Are we going to get in trouble? They left their post and
Yeah.
ran to help the one. But they debriefed afterward in their next meetings. They talked about what happened. What could we have done different? Did we do too much, not enough? So that collaborative discussion around what we do and how we do it is really the important part of feeling supported, even if you make a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. That's big. I love it. Beautiful stuff. Back to what's in my mind now, that this thought of like the way our worldview, our Christianity, our faith can actually set us up for a fallenness. Like we can be the first to serve the hardest. We can be the first to like go the extra mile, to go low, and then at the end of the day find ourselves like, well, I'm not doing good because I've served so hard. That's a really big reality in the church and as Christians, as Jesus followers. And maybe we wouldn't even recognize where it's become religious or unhealthy to ourselves, right?
Well, it can feel, the part of trauma that we don't always understand is that of betrayal. And so when we put ourselves out there, there's a reason why we do that. There's an implied promise, either something that we feel the Lord has called us to do, somebody's asked us to do. There's this great sense of starting the journey. It's going to be great. And then we walk the road, and then we find ourselves, in a mud hole down there. And then we feel what it does is it creates a sense of mistrust. It creates a mistrust in God. Well, what happened? Did he not lead me in the right direction? It creates a mistrust in our own vision and our own ability to make good decisions for ourselves. So I think when the perspective shifts that what I was doing right works now against me, we can have this sense of betrayal and feel like we somehow were betrayed by people that we served, what we do in ministry is we walk back through that. We ask them to revisit the Lord. What are we always want to protect ourselves with some mask or some way that we vow we make, or I'll never do that again, or rather than actually processing through it. And sometimes, especially people coming back from the mission field, and sometimes we feel like we're on the mission field, we need to debrief. We need people that will walk us through and really bring us a place of refreshing and perspective, because we can get so much tunnel vision in that call that when it falls, it feels like a huge betrayal.
Yeah. And that's the trickle down of trauma informed. There's a compassion, there's an understanding versus a get it right.
Mm-hmm.
A sense of like being with people in their experience. And I'm assuming you speak to this. I'm assuming just that exchange and understanding, compassionate nature of exchange, people start to breathe easier. Is that true? They start to like accept and like, okay, I matter, and what I've experienced is real, versus some of that religious stuff of like, what's my problem? I need to do better. I need to get over this, right?
Right. It's so, with the ACEs training, it's what happened.
Yeah.
What happened to you, as opposed to what did you do wrong? What could you have done different? And certainly in coaching, we can do that, but I think it has to come after what happened.
Yeah.
What happened? What happened to you? And I think that I like to bring that balance of what was right about you.
Nice.
And what was right about you, and what I see in you that was so beautiful that it overrode your ability to make a different decision. Like if you're working with a battered wife and she doesn't even understand herself why she stayed for 20 years, and then I'll say to her, wow, you must have really a strength of loyalty. Like your commitment to your vow and your commitment to belief that this would work was so beautiful. I mean, that's a beautiful thing about you. And it takes away the shame, because for every indiscretion, there's a calling in a person's life that caused them to walk out on that tightrope. There's belief, there's hope, there's faith in that. And so we have to also, in unpacking the pain around a decision that went wrong or experience, we have to build up the best of who they are as well, because they get to keep all that good stuff. It didn't work out so well right here, but that's the best of who they are. We don't want them to not believe, to pull back, and to be hopeless.
It's beautiful. Yeah, and really empowering. Like everything you're speaking out, I feel like people are going to feel better about themselves. And when people feel better about themselves, they're going to be more full. And, they're going to be more effective, and they're going to have fuller lives, happier lives, more joy. Yeah. I don't know, any parting thoughts, tools that you picked up along the way about staying full while you're pouring yourself out, staying healthy, even though you're so invested in missions that sometimes can be all consuming?
I think we know a lot of the basics. I have a little booklet. It really was never a big seller. It's mostly little things that I give away. It's called Take Back Your Life and Don't Let Trauma Win.
Yeah.
And so we think, well, why would looking at least in my office, all the red in my office, because I love this color. And so when I come in my office and I see all the colors in here, I love my office and I think about how I love this color. And it's a happiness exercise, you know. So sometimes when we just do small things like, you know, you got this beautiful coral shirt, you know, on. Do you like that shirt, Lance?
I do. I like that shirt. Thank you. It's really
Um, so you see, you know, so you smile. I know you love to surf. So what does it feel like when you get out your Vans and you got a little sand left in there from the last surfing trip?
I mean, that feels really good. And it reminds me to do it again.
Exactly.
And I live in a landlocked territory. So it's like it gives me some vision for like, oh, we're going to do that again soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so little things that we can do that don't seem like a lot. I mean, the new studies are that when we that we actually when we do that, we create neural pathways. Does it make the problem go away? No. Excuse me. Are we going to have to revisit it? Probably. But we have those moments of reprieve, and what we're actually doing then is we are moving out of that parasympathetic nervous system down to a place of normal that well when I breathe, when my heart rate is at a normal pace for me, I can actually think clearly. I can actually make better decisions. So the strategy in it is not just a distraction, although a distraction is a benefit. It actually brings me down to a place of homeostasis that I can actually make better decisions and I can actually think about different ways to be effective in making choices and decisions.
Wow, that's beautiful. What a great tool. I've, I've never heard that articulated. That was really empowering.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, where would people find, you've written all these books, where would people find some of these books? Because I see just in talking to you for like 30, 40 minutes, there's a lot of nuggets that
Mhm.
you're hearing. Where would people find your resources?
Well, I knew you were going to ask that. I didn't I have somebody who's trying to make me famous, and he gave me a little piece of paper like, if I'm lost, this is where you can find me. So I do have an Instagram, Yvonne Martinez. You can find me on YouTube or Instagram.
Nice.
Uh, so I'm here at Transformation Center, yvonne.martinez at bethel.com. You can find me here. My nonprofit organization is I Am Brave, and iambrave.info. I have an education side and I have a ministry side. Currently, I'm spearheading our addiction program here. We're working a lot with alcohol and sex addiction. So it's an interesting combination here, but you know, I've worked in that whole arena of trafficking for so long, working with victims, and I still do that. And but at the same time, I'm finding it interesting to be able to speak into somebody's life to change the way that they're viewing what they're doing with pornography. I think it's an important part of the healing, that whole arena of the misuse of our sexual connection.
Yeah, wow, I'm very excited about that. I mean, I think this is an issue for the ages. However, with the advent of technology, I think unhealthy sexuality is at a different level. Like it's peaking to a different degree, and that played out ultimately is the problem of human trafficking. Like there's this demand and this appetite for a fantasy that isn't real, and people are purchasing sex. And the answer to the human trafficking crisis is for people to stop purchasing sex. Literally that simple,
Mhm.
or seeing their sexuality healed. So the fact that you're working on that, that is exciting, really necessary. So a lot of good stuff around Yvonne. I'm always encouraged speaking to you. You've been so generous with us at Justice Collective and NCAT. Thank you for being so free with yourself and your gifts.
Mhm.
And I am definitely taking encouragement and hope to stay full as I'm living poured out. There's a way to do this.
I have to, well, I'll have to watch this afterwards so I can fan the flame for myself too. You know, we love what we do
No,
and
I think
we work hard at
we all work hard, but I think you've said some things that will encourage you too. So yeah, take some time. Again, thanks for sitting down with us, connecting with us at Justice Collective. Really good to have Yvonne with us. Yvonne, thank you. Have a great rest of your day. Bless you.
Welcome.
And I'll say goodbye to everyone else as I say goodbye to Yvonne. Peace, guys. Bless you.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.